I would sum up the sentiment by saying, like, I really like where CQI has landed, but I hate how we got here. And I think, that feeling of the betrayal that people have, the hurt, the lack of trust, what we've done to break relationships, like that's very, very present to all of us. And I think, that is going to inform the way we move forward in all of the processes that I'm going to talk to you about sort of moving forward.
If you've ever thought about doing business in the Middle East, or you're just curious about what's happening in one of the most exciting coffee markets in the world, we've launched a new direction for the Map of Forward Middle East podcast as an invaluable resource to help you find out more about doing business in the region. It features real conversations with values-driven entrepreneurs and businesses that have been operating in the region for years. Just as the global podcast, the Map of Forward Middle East podcast will talk about opportunities, challenges, and the realities of building something sustainable in a fast-evolving market. The show is in English and the guests are deeply inspiring. Search Map of Forward Middle East wherever you get your podcasts, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map of Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is take 2 of our series with Michael Sheridan, episode 4 of 5. We are talking about the changes at CQI. And what I mean by take 2 is we recorded the first 3 episodes. And then in our second meeting, we have had a couple of days to process a whole bunch of stuff that we talked about in episode 1, 2, and 3. And now we are here to record episode 4 and then episode 5. So welcome back to the podcast, Michael.
Nice to see you again.
Okay, in this episode, we are talking about CQI in transition. And I want to start this conversation by saying thank you for showing up to what was a difficult conversation, particularly in the 3rd episode of this series so far. You did not shy away from answering any of those questions. You did not, you weren't overly diplomatic about anything. And right? Like, you answered the questions. I say that with all the respect in the world because you could have just not answered. And you didn't take that route. You could have very easily said, Lee, I'm just not going to answer these questions. You keep asking me the same question. I'm not going to answer it. Move on. You did not do that. And so I'm grateful for that, and it needs to be recognized. And the reason I point this stuff out, folks, is because we as an industry are not great communicators. And I point these things out so that maybe when you're in a conversation with somebody who it's the same situation as what Michael and I are having, maybe you can have some grace for the courage that the person you're in a conversation with is showing. So I don't profess to be any kind of an amazing communicator. I'm always trying to do better. But it needed to be recognized. And before you go out there and shit talk Michael on the internet and have all these opinions, please remember this is a complicated situation. And our job, mine and Michael's and I, our job is to give you some insight into some of the realities of what happened and continuing to happen. So speaking of which, this episode is CQI in transition, what the immediate next steps are. So Michael, where are we at with CQI now that decisions have been made and contracts have been signed? What happens now?
Yeah, well, thank you again for the opportunity to be here and for everything you just shared. I appreciate that very much. I think, I'd like to just talk a little bit about the next maybe 6 months and the remainder of this year. Mm-hmm. The year is not shaping up as we thought it would when we were coming in. And so we're adjusting on the fly, and I feel good about what we've got lined up for the next 6 months. It starts with the transition of the queue, naturally. That was at the center of the agreements. And I think kind of the mechanics of that. So I would say there are 4 kind of processes in this transitionary period. And the first one is obviously the transition of the queue and the pathways for transition for learners and educators in the CQI system have been discussed a lot. And, we're actively working on these processes to help people who are going to make that transition do it in as smooth a way as possible. But, I think you're aware that current Q graders, labs Q graders, Q instructors, and Q assistant instructors have a kind of a fast track path to moving into the new Q system that's based on the CVA. There's a timeline on that that will go to the end of September. CQI will continue to offer its courses and classes to people who are interested in them. And then after that point, we will stop teaching classes. But through the end of the year, anyone who has a CQI certificate or has ever had a CQI certificate will be eligible to move into the system as a certified Q grader or a Q instructor by completing a 2-day course called the CVA for Cuppers. And we're working with SCA to support people who have signed up for that and are trying to make that transition possible. Our team has done a lot of work in trying to meet people where they are and be flexible in terms of policy. We've stopped charging. There are 20 tests in the queue, and people who may pass 17 or 18 or 19 will retake specific tests to try to earn their certification. We've waived the fees that CQI collects for that over the next few months as part of this transition, try to support people on that. It's a small thing that we could do. And then also changing some of the policies about the minimum number of people who need to be on a table. Again, just trying to be flexible and support people who are trying to earn their certification with us before our version of the queue ends on September 30th. That's the first one. I know there's a lot of activity out there right now. I want to talk about the others, but I want to stop in case you have any questions about that. Or
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
The other three are really forward-looking, and they start with the post-harvest processing program. So, right now we have two programs, as you know, one in quality education, quality evaluation, one in post-harvest processing. Coming into 2025, we already had really ambitious plans for our post-harvest processing program. In the first episode, when I was talking a little bit about CQI and how we work, I expressed kind of the special enthusiasm for the PHP program because it brings us into direct contact with the producers who are at the heart of our mission, and because it really does allow us to put our thumb on the scale of quality improvement in a way that's harder to do from the lab further downstream. We had our program was launched, the first full year of the program was 2018. And while there have been some updates, there hasn't been kind of a comprehensive review of that program and content since that time. And as you know, I feel like we've been traveling at light speed in terms of post-harvest processing. There's been this post-harvest processing revolution, as people have called it, innovation at breakneck speed and not always based on good science. And so we're looking at 2025 as our opportunity to revisit sort of the core progression of our post-harvest processing offerings. We have an intro to post-harvest processing, and then we have what we call QP1, QP2, and then ultimately QP3, but quality processing 1 for generalist certificate, quality processing 2 for professional certificate. That's really the QP2 is to the PHP program what the Q is to the QE program. It's where, coffee professionals who are in it every day, whether it's in the lab or at the mill, doing work to make the coffee trade function. This is the operative kind of professional level certification for them. In the PHP program, we have a higher level certification, which is the QP3 expert. It's an unbelievably rigorous year-long process, master's level kind of intensity, has an academic and practical focus. There's original research conducted on it. There are fewer than 100 of these people in the world. They're really the best of the best. It's a really exciting thing, but it's really not for everyone. So we think of that core progression as being intro to PHP, QP1, QP2, and we're looking at all of them together this year for the first time to sort of say, okay, what is the total body of knowledge, and then how do we allocate kind of information across the 3 sessions? And so there's a kind of a curriculum review, and then in each one of them, there'll be a detailed content review. And I think, we ended the last session, Lee, with this, we talked about it in different ways, but I would sum up the sentiment by saying like, I really like where CQI has landed, but I hate how we got here. And I think, that feeling of the betrayal that people have, the hurt, the lack of trust, what we've done to break relationships, like that's very, very present to all of us. And I think, that is going to inform the way we move forward in all of the processes that I'm going to talk to you about sort of moving forward, beginning with our PHP review. We're working on plans on both at the curriculum level, at the content level, creating spaces for our current instructor pool to be deeply involved in that. So a curriculum review, just the overall thinking about how we're going to adjust that core progression. Then on the content basis, like detailed review of what's actually happening in each course, doing that with active involvement of members of our educator community. And then doing, really importantly, doing kind of field testing of it, kicking the tires on it in the field with producers, getting feedback from everybody who's involved so that ultimately when that new progression gets released, it will have been, it will reflect the best thinking of everyone in that ecosystem. So I'm excited about the changes that will come about through that process, but also excited about the process itself beginning to, as part of what we need to do to build back trust in the community.
I have two questions about what you just said. First of all, when you say we feel deeply, like you feel that betrayal, you were commenting about that. You said we. Who's we? Because we in the previous episode, you were talking about who made the decision, right? And the decision was made by you and the board. So who's the we that feels the betrayal? Feels deeply about, sorry, you hearing. Who is the board? Do the board care about what's happened?
Absolutely.
Have they expressed that?
Yeah, I mean, the board, I think you might know, the board has showed up to every one of our community engagement sessions that we've had, beginning with the in-person meeting in Houston, the series of online meetings with QA instructors or educators, PHP educators, in-country partners. The board is acutely kind of aware of where the relationships stand and also deeply concerned about and emphasizing like the need to rebuild these relationships. And when I say we, I mean the whole organization, the people in the organization who have been building and cultivating and managing these relationships understand that we now have a deficit that we need to address of trust. And, we talked about this in the last episode, like we can't undo the decision, but we can show up every day, try to serve the mission and try to do better in terms of how we engage. And I think as we sort of look ahead and we look at these kind of 4 processes that I'm talking about in terms of our transition, it's like each one of them is an opportunity to do it better. And each
Right.
one of them is an opportunity to be more inclusive, more engaging. It doesn't mean that everything an instructor says should be in the content is going to get in. It just means there's a window of engagement. And, it is about building back trust, but it's also about building the best mousetrap, right? Like we want to build the best product. And the educator community is comprised of these incredible professionals who have all this experience and been teaching this stuff. And as they teach, and I think you talked about this a little bit with Tim. I know I've talked about it with him, but like as you teach, and Tim was very clear about this, like one of the things that's so exciting about working as coffee is that, even as educators, we're learning from the learners, right? We're all learning
Right.
all the time. And it's such a deep rabbit hole, and there are all these sort of branches and shoots that you can go down, and no one can know everything. And so we're always learning all the time. Trying to open this process up in a way that we can bring back as much of that richness to feed the core product, so that what we're pushing out is really reflective of the best thinking from everywhere. And so it's again trying to apply that lesson learned to everything that we're doing moving forward. So a year from now, we don't have a similar conversation about things that we've done to exclude or undermine trust.
The second question is, given what's just happened, how do we know that the SCA is not going to go and do the same thing with these new things that you're proposing? Not that you can speak for the SCA, but you can speak to if they tried to do the same thing again.
Well, I can't speak for the SCA, but what I can reflect is the nature of the conversations, which were, and the nature of the agreements, which really very clearly establish, that this is CQI's kind of space and it's our lane, and in that, we talked a little bit about this in one of the earlier episodes, that SCA is not able to do project work, given how it's structured, and CQI is, and so the agreements really try to maximize the power of that complementarity, and so that we can get deep traction, both in terms of the funding that CQI is giving us, but that SCA is giving us, but also kind of the primacy in that space on the project space. Now I know projects and PHP are different. Projects are much broader than just the PHP program. But I think very clearly the spirit of the arrangement is that this is CQI's space, and that SCA is focused on the sensory education. And this is CQI space. What I can say from a process perspective is there will not be another, even if SCA does move into this space, we will never make a transition like this again as long as I'm in leadership. I just won't do it. It's too damaging to the reputation and the relationships that we have. So, again, I can't speak for SCA. I can speak to the spirit of the conversations that we've had, and they've been really about supporting CQI in the space that we occupy in post-harvest processing. And I know that I know I speak for myself only, but I think I probably also speak for the board in saying there's no appetite for another transition like that if and when we ever got to that kind of scenario.
But given the perceived predatory nature of the SCA and what they've done here, and by perceived, I don't just mean my perceived, my perception that there's a predatory nature here of the SCA, in my opinion. There's a lot of people out there in the and amongst the Q graders in the community, but also outside, like in the business community, not the Q grading community. There is a lot of perception out of this that this transaction and the lead up to it was a grooming process. Both they groomed the coffee community and they groomed this scenario and were quite predatory in this, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinions. Given that, how are we meant to believe that the spirit of the relationship? Do you have confidence in the spirit of the relationship between the CQI and the SCA now, after what's happened?
Yeah, I guess I don't see it as predatory. It doesn't feel predatory. I think if we go back to how the CVA emerged, I think during COVID, I believe, and again, I can't speak to this with authority, but the understanding is that during COVID, a lot of the thinking about ways the 2004 standard could be updated and improved, there was bandwidth to address that. The work that SCA put in, I think, is really impressive over a period of years, very solid sensory. I'm not a sensory scientist, but as a coffee professional, I'm impressed with the sensory science behind the CVA approach. I think it's been helpful as I've tried to follow a little bit of the conversation in the industry over the last month to hear the distinction between the science and the tools. I think there's some people are still struggling to digest the tools, but and there's some criticism of the tools from people who are trying to incorporate them. But there's people feel it's a separate conversation about the science behind it. So I see a very thorough, impressive process to try to bring the best sensory science to bear on quality evaluation. There was a book written about it. There was this kind of process where there was the attribute-based definition of quality, kind of refocusing the conversation away from some objective measure of quality to a more subjective set of value-based assessments of quality that lead up to value, and then the publication of it. So I think it's been, I think that's been a good faith effort to do something great for coffee, to bring quality evaluation to a different place. And so I don't see any of that as predatory. I see that as just doing something that was long overdue. I think part of the depth and breadth of the disruption of what's happening this year on quality evaluation is a reflection of the fact that the standard didn't change for 18 to 20 years, and that's kind of uncommon. And so if we had a continuous improvement or continuous revision model where every 3 to 5 years there was a change, I think we would have gotten by now much better at absorbing those changes and transitioning with them, and we haven't done. And so I think a lot of the disruption, again, I can't speak to motivation. I can't speak to somebody else's what brought them to the
motivation.
table.
I get that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think
But
there's another way to see it that's not predatory. That's the result of a process that was done in good faith with good science.
I'm not sure that many people are ever going to see it this way after the way that it went, but we're just going to leave that there for a second. What I do want to ask you is, how does what y'all have been focusing on in a year like 2025, how come it became the biggest question that was focused on in a year like 2025? And you know what we're going to do? We're going to answer that in the next episode.
Okay.
So join us for the next episode, folks. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.